Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining this meeting. Please ask you when you join to please mute yourself so that we can so that there's not much interference, as there are quite a few of us on the webinar today. So this webinar is on demonstrating progress and impact of the 10YP. It's the launch of the 10YP framework to measure its success. So the webinar will be co-presented by Pekka Huovila, the chair of the 10YP MNE task force. Pekka, would you like to say a few words?
So welcome the webinarists to this event, and also like to give thanks to the other contributors to the work so far. So Usha Iraniga from SDG program has been co-chairing it, and all the programs have been contributing to the work that has been prepared by the Secretariat that has provided a very solid background document to the work.
Thank you, Pekka. So as Pekka said, he's also the coordinator of the Sustainable Buildings and Construction of the 10YP. And of course, this is co-presented also by the 10YP Secretariat, represented by myself, Cecilia Lopez-Tiroyo, coordinator of the 10YP Secretariat at UN Environment. So the objectives of this webinar are basically to share information on the framework, on demonstrating progress and impact in the 10YP, which, as Pekka said, has been developed by the 10YP Monitoring and Evaluation Task Force, which he chairs. It's also to provide an insight on the indicators and the measures of success, and to provide all actors involved in the 2017 pilot reporting, and of course the reporting that will continue in the following years, the necessary information to do so. The framework itself, the documents containing the framework, is available on the 10YP institutional website, which is hosted by the unet.org platform, as well as on the recently upgraded Global SCP Clearinghouse. This link has been shared through the email that invited you to this webinar, and will be shared again with you after this webinar. We will also share the slides that we will be showing now. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what this webinar is going to contain, we'll have a brief introduction and background on this framework for demonstrating progress and impact. Then Pekka will be running you through the principles of this framework, as well as the pilot 10YP indicators. After that, we'll briefly go through the process in particular in terms of data collection, monitoring, and reporting, as well as, of course, a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to send in any questions in the chat, or at the end of the session of each of these sections to raise any questions that you may have. So just to give us a bit of the background, ultimately it goes back to, in terms of objectives, you can only manage what you can measure. So the development of the demonstrating impact, progress and impact framework including, of course, the 10YP indicators, a means for verification and for reporting to measure the enhanced capacity for and the progress towards accelerating the shift to SCP, attributable to the implementation of the 10YP and where possible beyond. The overall objective of this M&A framework is to guide and measure in a participatory way the collective impact in the shift to SCP. The framework is intended to reflect key milestones towards this global shift, primarily as supported by the 10YP, and with the objective of expanding this primary scope beyond. So in terms of aims, we've got two or so sub-objectives, or two main aims, one that we could consider more internal and one that we could consider more external. So the more internal one is to assess and improve performance, to use it as a tool to assess and improve performance, to inform the planning of activities and the allocation of funds. The more external aim is to be able to report and demonstrate progress, to show accountability towards all actors and donors, so we can communicate the results to a wider public and thereby mobilize political and financial support towards the activities that the 10YP is undertaking. So just as a bit of background on how this went, this has been a thorough process that has gone through first the desk review and then the extensive work that the OYFP Task Force on Monitoring and Evaluation has developed throughout the last 6 months of this year. So the desk review really looked at using as a starting point the adopted Rio +20 documents and the 13 functions of the OYFP. It looked at the alignment with the relevant SDGs and their indicators. And it went through a literature review of existing relevant SCP and capacity building indicators. The OYFP Monitoring and Evaluation Task Force was established in June this year and is chaired by, as we said at the beginning of this webinar, by Pekka, who's also the SDG program coordinator and represents Finland. It's composed of representatives of all of the programs as well as of the regional and national perspectives. And we will give you a bit of an overview of who are the people in the task force at the end of the presentation. And the task force really focused on building on existing program documents, on the indicators and the strategies that we already have, and look at making sure, did a reality check, look at what was feasible, attributable, and measurable, and of course we consider data availability and the effort that is required to do this report. I should add that this monitoring and evaluation framework was requested by the OYFP board, and that the board validated the pilot indicators for the 2017 report in October this year. So what is this framework for demonstrating progress and impact composed of? The framework is composed primarily of a limited and non-exhaustive set of indicators which are realistic, measurable, attributable, and within the scope of the OYFP and SDGs. It is also composed of associated methodology. Each of these indicators has associated metadata sheets which indicated the methodology for data collection and reporting and what exactly we are measuring, and Pekka will go through this a little bit later. The general principles for the use of these indicators, and of course the associated process in terms of reporting and data collection, as well as of course the associated tools for this process, so the reporting templates which have been developed. So I think this gets me to the general background and the main points I want to discuss here. I will now hand over to Pekka, who will be running you through the principles of the framework and the indicators.
Thank you, Cecilia. And this webinar consists of 4 parts. I first try to explain these principles and then go more through the pilot indicators. We have selected 20 of them. And at that point we can have some clarifying questions, or if you need some, or something is not clear, you can also use the chat box or raise your hand. After these 2 presentations, there will be also the process explained by Cecilia again, and at the end we have still time for discussion, whatever has been left open to that. But starting from these principles, there's a slide that shows like 4 quadrants that you may have seen a couple of times. Starting from the top left corner, which this OYFP is serving for, that's to accelerate the shift towards sustainable consumption and production in all countries. Then secondly, increasing the resource efficiency and also decoupling economic growth and environmental degradation. At the same time, looking at creating these jobs, poverty eradication, and shared prosperity. We are looking at this, how it can serve as a knowledge-sharing platform and also supporting capacity building. And these 4 patterns have been also taken as a guideline for the framework, where we have identified the indicators that are used then to measure this collective impact that we try to set up in a participatory way with the different stakeholders, and also assessing the impacts of the OYFP program as an instrument. Another reference to this framework is then the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's one of them, namely number 12, on improving global efficiency, consumption, production, that all the programs are clearly contributing to. In addition to that, there are also other SDGs, like number 11 on cities and human settlements, how they can become inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. 8 that you see in the slide, decoupling economic growth, that was already mentioned in the first slide. So each program is also contributing to some sustainable development goals, and that is also serving to support the nations, the countries that are developing their own implementation strategies on this. These SDGs, there's direct links to 10 of them, the indicators at output and outcome levels. Then there are some association with 15 more at the impact level, and this is also serving as a methodology for these processes in developing and implementing those certain development goals in different countries. Then moving on to the general principles, what are the criteria for the indicators we have been choosing. So they have to be relevant to the work we are doing. There should be specific targets which is related to the area of improvement. They must be measurable. When scanning through a long list of potential indicators, we have to exclude some of them that are not clearly measurable at this stage. So later on, when we have tested the first set and along with maybe improved knowledge, we can consider also other indicators. But now we try to look at things that can be clearly measured in a reliable way. They have to be attributable. We have to specify who will do it. They have to be realistic also, that what can be really achieved there, and also somehow time-bound when the results can be achieved. But that has been organized in our framework to those outputs, like more or less immediate indicators, then the outcomes that are impacts of the outputs, and then the impact indicators that are then like medium to long term, that are resulting only after these indicators or the activities towards meeting these objectives have been set up. Then maybe more in detail about these types of indicators I shortly mentioned already. The output indicators, there's already a unit program manual that has defined in a way that these output indicators are related to the products or services that result from the completion of activities within an intervention, and the outcome indicators are then achieved in short-term and medium-term effects of the outputs, usually requiring collective efforts of partners, and outcomes then represent changes which occur between the completion of the outputs and the achievement of the impact. And in some cases, these are a bit arbitrary, that some programs may find one indicator for them as an output indicator, and for some other program it may be seen as an outcome indicator. However, the impact indicators that are also in our exercise like this field testing we are going to start soon, they are seen more as a medium or long-term impact when we focus on the two first categories. So mainly those output and outcome indicators, and I will explain soon more in detail which are those indicators. Also the methodology and these metadata sheets that are like implementing this way of how they are reported and collected, that's more set for these output and outcome indicators. Then it's also mentioned on these baselines and targets. That's not mandatory. We feel that today it's not maybe realistic to expect to achieve national or regional or sector-based baseline for these indicators. And if there's no baseline, it's difficult to set any target. But we try to look for also baselines and targets for those. And that is to be seen how well we succeed in that. And then concerning the possible improvements of this framework, we try to keep it flexible in a way. This field test is now starting next year based on the documentation of the methodology, description of those indicators, where the output and outcome indicators have already completed with and commented by the task group in these metadata sheets. If it turns out that these are not like serving our purpose, we can do some improvements there just within the existing framework. However, if it turns out that there's a major revisions needed for the whole system or structure, then we have to present the results to the board. So far, what we have done until now is that we have tried to look at indicators that are relevant to this 10-year framework of programs, forecasting, consumption, and production, and also the different programs, the programs, each of them. And we have not done any proper testing yet. It will start only now, and I expect that by summer next year or towards the fall, we have then been able to collect data from each program, and then we also find out whether which are the common indicators to all these programs, and which are maybe program specific, and there may be also new indicators that are proposed to be added by different programs. And like said in the chat box, if you haven't seen that, is that this presentation will be shared and also uploaded to this global clearinghouse website, so you can find the information also afterwards. And the more detailed information about all these indicators that can be then found, because we are not going here in this presentation into details of these effects of the metadata sheets, but the general methodology description and those templates are also available. So this is more or less what I see as the principles for how we have developed this system, and then we could have a closer look at which are the 20 indicators, like 13 plus 7. Starting from these output indicators, we have classified that in a way these arrows from bottom to up show that when we initiate activities in this 10YFP and its different programs, we can look at the direct outputs that are then organized here in a symmetric way, addressing to both these capacity building activities and then
Sorry to interrupt. The screen is very small, it's not readable.
Is there something, Cecilia, you can do for that, because I cannot manage it from here? Anyway, these 4 categories, there's an individual slide of each of them. Maybe I can spend more time on those, because then you'll see smaller number of those indicators. Maybe we go directly there if this is not, but this was mainly to show that there are these capacity building, knowledge sharing, output indicators, and then we look at the outcomes that are following, supporting the shift towards sustainable consumption and production. And this is our primary area of exercise now, like these 13 indicators. And then we have identified 7 more impact indicators that are for longer term, and the methodology for how to collect data and do this assessment for those 7 impact indicators is not defined in the same way yet as for these first 3 objectives of output and outcome indicators. Maybe we go to next slide that should show more in detail these output indicators, if that's better visible.
Just let me add a backup for those that can't see it properly. You can increase the size of the screen manually from your side if you need to also. Just for the technical part of it. Yeah, I'll now change the slide.
Right. So these examples of the capacity building related indicators on that we have identified that projects that are initiated in these by these programs. That's one issue where we can measure the capacity building, because then we have been either funding those projects that are building up the capacity of the team, or then we have been in some other way supporting their existence by branding and giving the quality assurance to that. Then there's a separate indicator for this financing. They may be a bit like overlapping as the heading, because at the heading level, because the project doesn't have a budget also, but that is at least for the time being kept apart. So we look at the projects and we look at the money that has been generated for this sustainable consumption and production activities, and then training as a separate activity. So these are the I think quite clear output indicators for the first objective. And at this stage we have not defined any like minimum budget for that. So if we think of a training program, whether it's a 2-year or 2-week or 2-day training program, that is to be validated when all these programs, when they are collecting the data, then we see we need to set some minimum budget as an example for these activities to be reported in this case. But these are the topics for the capacity building. And then looking at the knowledge sharing, we have the networks and also the outreach activities, and then production of knowledge and tools. This indicator 2.3 on production of these knowledge and tools, that is in a way the topic is covered at 2 levels. The output is whether the programs are producing these tools and knowledge that can be used, and then as an outcome the issue is measured how that is used in practice. We must take into account or consider that there's no double accounting here, in a sense that when we collect data and report it under one indicator, the same data is collected only once, not in 2 separate indicators. So these output indicators, like for these SAP tools, means that which are the tools that we have developed and shared through the clearinghouse or other means. And the second category was these outcome indicators, and there are 7 of them that we have selected, looking at the policy instruments, then the reporting activities, education as a separate topic, then which are the changes in practices, different commitments by governments or other organizations, then those coordinating activities, and then this 3.7 that is linked with this 2.3, which means that we as an example can count on the downloads, how many times they have been downloaded from the website, but we can also look at which have been the impacts when these tools have been taken to practice. So these are the indicators, outcome indicators at the heading level. Each of them, I will still explain later on what all these metadata sheets contain, but we are not going through that in detail yet. The third category there, what we had was these impact indicators, and they are issues that cannot maybe be measured during the implementation project, but rather afterwards. And like in SBC program that I'm coordinating, we are dealing with the buildings and the built environments, and that typically if we start a implementation project, that it may require 1 year time to design a building, 2 years to build it, and then the impacts in operation may be assessed in 3 years. After that, there's a 5-year time span in that. So we can use these indicators as targets in the beginning, but to validate the results in practice, it will take a longer time. And since this program is like designed to last for until 2022, for 10 years since 2012, there may be many things that we are not able to measure during the program's lifetime. However, the methodology still remains, and we hope that other programs or other activities can use the same systems, and that is one of the results that doesn't die when this program is completed. All these indicators are also described how they relate with the different sustainable development goals, and like said, these impact indicators are not having yet described as detailed methodology as for the outcome, and they may be, let's say, more relevant to some programs than some others. And we hope that as many programs out of our 6 will use as many indicators as possible, but it may be that there are a couple of those that are common to all programs, and then some indicators that are more relevant to some programs. These are the 7 indicators, and out of these we have only defined so far the first 2 on energy efficiency and these greenhouse gas emissions, which may also be applied in a way that in the countries where the infrastructure or knowledge is not yet relevant to do these greenhouse gas emission calculations, they might measure what is the energy consumption level and how much the energy efficiency can be improved. Whereas in some other countries, if it is a global program, you have already tools and databases. You can look at how much the greenhouse gas emissions are saved in improved activities. So they can be used in different ways. And then the things of material efficiency, waste, water, land use, they can be a bit more relevant to certain areas. Like water scarcity is more important in some other areas, whereas for some others maybe not. And this employment is looked at a bit looking at how these activities can provide employment for the local actors, but also which are the working conditions. So this is the steps, and the first 13, 6 or 7, all these metadata sheets are described, and for here only the first 2. And after this testing phase, we'll see how far we can go on that. And still some words on this methodology. There's some sort of definition also that we are applying here for the sustainable consumption and production by I think UN report that has, it's in the next slide if you can change that. What do we mean here by these services and products that are related to the CP? You can read it from that text. So all the indicators are meeting these objectives like that definition, and then we have a organized, very rigorous methodology or background for that. So all programs and all actors collecting the data and doing the assessment follow the same procedure. It means that it's not related by who is doing this data collection and assessment. We should get the same comparable results. Then looking at the attribution categories, we have been discussing that topic at 3 levels. There are activities that are directly supported by OYFP. As an example, those trust fund projects that we have, we have at least 50 up and running now. They are funded by the trust fund that is coming from the donations of governments, and they are grants, and those projects are directly supported. So that's one clear measure. We can both calculate how many projects and how much money has been spent, and then looking at which are the impacts of those projects, and then depending on the aggregation categories, we can look at whether they are focusing on certain regions or age groups or gender issues. Second category here is those that are not directly supported. They can relate with this portfolio, or they are NYC branded, which means that that the programs have supported creation of those implementation projects. They have been quality assured, they have been supported by the market stakeholder advisory committee members, and then they have achieved the status of being a 10 OYFP programs. The flagship projects are typically those, at least in our SBC program, and they also get, if wanted, an endorsement from the secretariat, and we have also done that by let's say, as coordinators. But then we can also have other projects that are linked with our activities that meet the objectives and where we have somehow been involved. This is maybe a bit vague and borderline, which are the things that could have happened without us and how much are in fact affected by our activities. Like if we discuss with governments or cities, for example, in our domain, and they implement different policies, startup projects, which we are not funding, but we have been somehow been involved in. I think they can be reported as other activities of this 10 OYFP program. But it has to be made clear what is our role there. Then these aggregation categories can look at different reporting periods or many other ways of the aggregation. And then what already was a bit discussed about these baselines and targets. Where possible, we try to get, as an example, national baselines. Can be also regional, can be also sector-based, and once the baseline is existing, then the targets can be set and the progress measured about the improvement against some qualitative outcome and these quantitative impacts. So this is about this methodology that we are applying, and maybe we can have a look at the structure of these metadata sheets. So all of them are starting by describing first the name of the indicator, and then which are the 10 OYFP objectives and the sustainable development goals they are addressing. So that's the first thing for all of them. And we have a precise definition, try to link it with some international definitions already, so that it's not only the aspects that can be associated by the heading of the indicator, but it's clearly described which is the precise content of that indicator. Also looking at the methods of computation and explanation of how the indicator is calculated. There's also possibility to add some examples of already provided, let's say, calculated indicators, so that those that are filling the metadata sheets can have an example. Then this aggregation, different dimensions and levels, like we can look at different income groups, gender issues, age groups, geographical locations, different accessibility or disability issues. And that is a bit indicator specific. We have not fixed necessarily which are options of the relevant disaggregation categories, but when collecting the data, that will be then found out and harmonized between these 10 OYFP frameworks. Then the baselines and targets, so we touched a couple of times when applicable. And then the source of data, I think we have something on that separately, but that's very important. If we have already some like international databases or national references that can be used there for collecting the data, but also each program should have in their work plan issued a report, and hopefully at least we try to do that in SBC in a way that the data is anyway collected, and then the data that we would report to the secretariat and to the stakeholders of our outcome is like flowing into these metadata sheets. And then all comments, they are valuable on the feasibility and relevance and different limitations of the indicators, where the sources maybe not so reliable or other things that can be subjective. And if possible, then some references, like as an example, this energy efficiency or greenhouse gas emissions. These are things that are in the building sector, like our domain SPC, they are already existing in many places, and then we can give the URL to the database that provides information that can then help other regions and other actors to set up their baseline studies and are also supporting the calculation method if it's applicable. And then still a bit on these data sources. Each program has identified which are their main sources of data. There should be a slide on that also. Like the Secretariat can do some surveys, use these national focal points to support other actors and stakeholders to collect the data, and that would be like a collective survey by the Secretariat. That can be also done by individual programs, but in principle the idea is that each program has also the primary responsibility lies in the programs, and they should organize the system on how to collect the information. For some issues like those projects funded by the OYFP, that can be built into the contract already, that the programs have to report using these indicators, where it's a bit requiring some labor work, then the coordination desk, MAC members, partners, they together have to find out which are the ways of collecting the data. Different surveys can be conducted for that, and this is once again then validated when we do the actual testing next year. This is what I had in mind to show about this whole framework and the indicators we have at present. And do you have, Cecilia, something to complement there? And also the others, if there are some clarifying questions, now we can take them before moving on to this reporting process.
Thanks, Becca. I think you've covered everything, and so I don't think I have much to add. Just, I guess, in a principle, as Becca has said, this is 2017. We'll see the pilot reporting on these indicators, and then further fine-tuning after that pilot reporting. I mean, how can we use also this framework that is given in across the 10 YFP actors? They're fairly practical indicators if you look at them. Goes from number of person day of training to number of knowledge resources that have been developed to the number of governments and other organizations making progress in developing or adopting policies on SDGs. So I think these are things that also when we undertake our activities, we can start already framing this to make sure that when we have through the pilot reporting phase and the next reporting phase, we can refine the indicators as most adequate in the way that they are working. So I think that was one point. And then, of course, to complement on what you were saying on the impact indicators. So as Becca said, the impact indicators today, there is no harmonized methodology on this, and this is something that the task force expressly decided to do, to start focusing on the shorter and medium term results of the 10 YFP. However, we would really encourage any of the 10 YFP actors to send us their feedback and suggestions and the current data that you may already have in terms of the impact indicators that have been identified. So that would allow us to then have an idea of what is already available and build on that, rather than developing an impact indicator that might not be fully aligned with what you are already doing. I think that was just my 2 cents added to what Pekka was saying. I can already see some questions in the chat box, Pekka, so if you wish, we can maybe take 1 or 2 of those.
That's fine, just that I somehow haven't received those questions. I think they have been addressed to you only.
So I'm actually going to ask, because Louise has sent in quite a few questions, so I'm going to ask you, Louise, to just briefly summarize then all of her questions.
Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you, Paka, for a great presentation. It's a very complex area, and you presented it very clearly. So thank you for that, first of all. I'll go from the bottom of my questions. I'm sorry, it seems like it was going to you, Paka, as well, but I don't think they reached you. On the last or penultimate slide, on the metadata sheets, you covered a lot of areas which are really useful. But one of the areas I frequently see is sort of forgotten when we're thinking about creating indicators data set is how we're actually going to use the results. So I'd encourage you to look at that. What does it mean? How is it then going to be communicated? How is it going to be used to change policy? So sort of frameworks for sharing the data, as well as, how to collect it, because that's the only way we're really going to create impact, to your first point, which is presumably the point of all this. The other point that I want to mention, and then I'll stop, is Sustainable Travel International is piloting one of your projects, catalytic projects in the South Pacific. And what we're actually doing is we're implementing the SDG indicators in hotels. So we're taking those project impact indicators and we're trying to figure out, so right now I've got two people in Samoa discussing with hoteliers which indicators they're able to monitor, which they're not, and we're trying to create a pilot system. So we're happy to help with that. One area we really appreciate help in, and I encourage you guys to think about, is the business case for all this. Another area I think that there's real lack of information in how to convince the business of the bottom line benefits of each of these monitoring indicators. And it goes back to how we're going to use it, what difference it's going to make, what differences it makes to this particular business. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. For a very relevant question. Maybe I can start by commenting or saying something, and Cecilia may complement on that. I think from the 10YFP point of view, this indicator or monitoring evaluation framework provides also us a good opportunity for collaborating, like you mentioned this tourism as an example, and those impact indicators. There might be aspects that are then related, as an example, for building technologies, and SPC and STP could then together find out the best ways of collecting data and supporting those actors that are then monitoring their impacts. And I think increasingly in many sectors there are stakeholders, there are clients that are willing to communicate their stakeholder groups, which are their impacts and which are their sustainability features. And at present, in many cases, there aren't any universal labels or indicators that can be used for that. In some cases there are, but in many cases maybe not. And I hope this framework, these indicators can help in that. And then the other thing on what you said first on which are the real impacts of these policies and other issues. So I think you may specify that, but my understanding was that the board that is in a way managing this whole instrument requested these metrics so that they can better follow which are the actual outcome of the program. And therefore, now that we collect the data and report to them and also other stakeholders on which are the impacts, they should then be able to direct and guide and give advice us also on how the program can be improved in these SCP measures. And of course, the data that we are able to collect then shows how closely to the actual impact they are leading. But maybe Cecilia can comment more on this first aspect.
Thanks, Becca. No, I think, your points, thank you for your points, Louise, they're very useful, and I think they're perfectly to the point. I think, one of the aims of the framework is communicating the results. As I said at the beginning, one is to how we're going to use this result to assess our performance, to inform the planning, to help us in allocating the resources where they're needed most. And the other side, externally, sorry, I can hear a lot of background noise. Give me 1 second. And on the other side, to demonstrate progress, so showing accountability, of course, towards the actors, the donors, across the 10YP, of course, to communicate and to mobilize political and financial support. So, of course, there are more traditional tools that can be used, including the fact that these will go into the reports that go to the high-level political forum. They will be linked to the HRTS processes on the SDGs. The board outsource the member states also, and therefore, I mean, all of this goes towards that more political, if you will, support. Of course, as you mentioned, there's also other categories of actors, and this is really where the task force could benefit a lot from your help also in making sure that the messages that come out of this reporting can be fine-tuned so as to make them more appealing, both in terms of communicating the results and the business case. Right? I hope that responds to your question, at least in part, Louise.
Thank you. Yes.
Maybe even the section of this reporting process also clarifies a bit this question.
Yeah.
Can we take that and then discuss at the end also?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really a case of thinking at different scales how these be useful, because yes, for UNEP and at political levels, these are all really useful indicators, but to convince those who have to provide data at a national, at a district, at a business, at a small and large scale basis, we have to think of what are the benefits for those particular actors. And I think the spheres of impact that you can think about in SCP terms that perhaps we need to all spend some time thinking about.
So thank you, Louise, and thank you, Pekka. I'll just, as Pekka suggested, probably briefly go through the last section of this webinar, and then we'll take more questions. Because I think this also, as Pekka mentioned, responds to some of the questions that Louise raised and that you also may have. So this is, I'll briefly go through basically the process around demonstrating progress and impact for NYC and as the data collection and reporting aspects linked to the indicators that Pekka just presented. So, I mean, as we've discussed, and I probably don't need to go into much detail here because in answering Louise's question, I just probably described this slide, but really this framework is to be used to help us define priorities, to support decisions on funding allocations, and to guide the evaluation as well as, of course, the external communication on what we are all doing. So the central element of this is, of course, the monitoring and reporting, the data collection, the data analysis, and then, of course, the consolidation of this data that we've collected. So in terms of reporting responsibilities, as you can see from the slide, we've grouped the main 10YP actors into the different groups on this slide. So, of course, we have, in terms of reporting responsibilities, first and foremost, the 10YSP actors which are receiving funds or implementing 10YSP activities as per the program portfolios, which are responsible for monitoring the progress of that project and for reporting to the relevant donors, programs, secretaries accordingly. I mean, for instance, with the trust fund projects, the catalytic project, you have there are reporting requirements already through the legal instruments. So that's one level of reporting. The next one is at the level of the 10YP program coordination desk, with the support from and in coordination with their multi-stakeholder advisory committees and program partners. So the reporting requirements that would lie at that level are monitoring the overall progress of the program and associated activities, including those directly supported by the 10YP and where possible beyond. So the responsibility lies in preparing also the annual program progress report, as well as providing information and updates that the 10YP may require, as I mentioned earlier. The 10YP national focal points, and there may be a number of you on this webinar. I know there were quite a few this morning. So the 10YP national focal points are also encouraged to report on national executive policy initiatives And for instance, through responding to the 10YFP Global Survey on national SDG policies and initiatives, which some of you have already responded to or provided, and for which currently we are analyzing the data. I have a little bit more information on the Global Survey on the following slide, but there is really where the role of the 10YFP national focal points are in contributing to the demonstrating progress and impact framework. 10YFP stakeholder focal points and other 10YFP actors in the 10YFP organizational structure, as for instance the UN Interagency Group, the regional SDG dialogues and roundtables, may also support the framework on demonstrating progress and impact as most appropriate. The 10YFP Secretariat, in coordination, of course, with the relevant programs and the 10YFP actors, where our responsibilities too. For us, it lies mostly in monitoring the overall progress of the 10YFP and preparing the annual 10YFP progress report based on the information that you will be providing us and bringing it across the 10YFP. We're also, of course, working closely with the board in supporting the preparations for the 10YFP midterm review. I mentioned this here because this is closely linked to this framework on demonstrating progress and impact, where the board really wants to see this as a central tool in the midterm review to be able to demonstrate results achieved and progress and impact, of course, of the 10YFP. And of course, then we inform the 10YFP board on development on a continuous basis. The responsibilities that lie with the 10YFP board are, of course, reviewing the annual 10YFP progress report and reporting annually to the high-level political forum. So that gives you a bit of an overview in terms of the different groups of 10YFP actors, of how we can all work together on the demonstrating progress and impact framework. So as I mentioned earlier, the Global Survey on National SDG Policies and Initiatives, for those of you online who participated to this, thank you very much for all of your input to this. The first survey was conducted in 2015 and will be published in the coming April. It will be the Global Report on National SDG Policies and Initiatives and will highlight key trends at global and regional level. In the next iteration of the progress reporting and based on the pilot phase, the global survey will be fully aligned with the framework on demonstrating progress and impact, using the same indicators and some of the information beyond as most appropriate at national level. So in terms of just a quick overview of what this means in terms of timelines and what we're looking at. So of course we work backwards every year. The 10YFP is a mandated requirement that we report to HRTF. It's also an opportunity because it really brings the association very close with the HRTF and the SDGs. Every year the reporting to HRTF is in mid-April. So working back from there, then of course we have the different groups of actors that contribute to the reporting up until the consolidation. So in terms of, for instance, the annual progress reports that are sent to the Secretariat for then consolidation into the overall report that is by the 16th of February. The 10YFP Secretariat works on this consolidation and submits it to the board. The board will then submit it to HRTF. Of course, monitoring is a process throughout the year. And so the data collection can happen throughout the year. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in January every year, especially as concerns, of course, your activities and your own legal reporting requirements. So I guess that was would be brief in terms of the reporting process. I think that's mostly the information I wanted to provide. And on this slide, I'm just giving you an overview, as I initially mentioned, on who are the members of the task force. The report is chaired by Pekka and co-chaired by Usha from the SDC program. We have representatives of all 6 of the 10YFP programs, and the regional and national perspective into this framework has been ensured by the UNEP Regional Office for Asia Pacific and by Fabienne Pierre at the 10YFP Secretariat, who is regularly in contact with you in the regions and with the national focal point. So the task force is an open task force. So you're most, for any of you who might be interested in joining the task force, are most welcome to do so. As Pekka mentioned earlier, there will be a further refinement of this framework as we learn from the experience of the first reporting phases. So the pilot reporting, as we mentioned, will be launched in January this year, and on the basis of that, there will be further refinement and development. So please do get in touch with us if you wish to join this task force. So Pekka, maybe you have something that you would like to add to this section?
No, thanks. I think it was very clear. We have still some time for discussing or trying to answer the questions you might have on the whole setting.
So I see a question that has been submitted by very small by Ronald. Ronald, would you like to share the question with everyone on the webinar?
Cecilia, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Anna.
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Yes, just a couple of questions. Just hearing your presentation, and thank you very much for it. Thank you so much for the hard work. I know this is not an easy one, and you managed beautifully. So, a couple of questions. I'm assuming that each one of the programs will then define the best way of rolling the system or incorporating the system into the program, and if so, for industry projects, would there be a phase for them to incorporate into their logical frameworks and theory of change and so on, this new system that you're launching today, measuring system that you're launching today? And then just because of our interaction with the national focal points in some of the countries, it will be useful for us to know how will they be supported in terms of rolling this out countrywide? In other words, what kind of support can the national focal points expect from the secretariat or other players to be able to convince locally that we need to report using this framework? Thanks, Cecilia and Pekka.
The sound was a bit cut to my end. I didn't capture the question as a whole for the first part, but maybe Cecilia, you got it.
I think it did cut quite a bit. From my understanding, Ronald was asking how we envisage integrating this framework in the projects that are already ongoing. I'm assuming that was your question on the first point.
I can try to answer that one first, and then you maybe take the second one on these national focal points. Each program has been defined in their own ways, and in some cases, like in SPC, we already had a number of indicators there in our program document, and therefore, in some activities, these indicators are already logically flowing in from the work plan to the implementation phase. But that is a bit program specific. I think I cannot give the full answer on behalf of all the programs, but what we have discussed together, I think that at least for the activities that we are focusing in the future, in the coming years, then we can take this indicator framework there as a guiding principle for those implementation activities.
Maybe I can just add to that also. I mean, it is clear that not all the activities that your projects that are ongoing will contribute to all of the indicators, right? And some of them may be fairly easy to adapt. I mean, if you are taking a training within that project, for instance, transforming into a number of hour trainings to a number of person-day trainings is an information that you presumably would have available. We've made sure, and that's why we chose also person day, for instance, because person day is easier to measure and we may already have the information in-house. It's just a question of taking the number of participants and multiplying it by the number of days of the training undertook. So, I mean, where it's easy enough, I think these things could be integrated in a relatively straightforward manner. But then, of course, I mean, related to the part on the program coordination, then so the reporting tool is being developed by the task force and will be shared by the program coordination desk. So from the program perspective, the annual program progress reporting is coordinated by the program coordination desk itself. And on your point on the national focal points, that's a very good point, and thank you very much for that. And Fabian will be discussing with all of the national focal points shortly about the results of the first survey and on how best to frame that the next global survey and how best to work and support the national focal points. So I think that I will definitely bring this point back to her and something that we do need to consider in the next global survey. So I hope I've responded to your question on that. And if there are any other questions, please do feel free to either unmute yourself, raise your hand, or put it in the chat box.
If you have another question, if you bear with me, Parker and Cecilia, on the impact indicators that are sort of more project-related, energy efficiency, etc., the 4.1s to 4.7s on your slide. It would be great if there was some training around these. I know you haven't figured out all the methodologies for all of them. But particularly things like 4.3, which are not the standard indicators, material use reduction, and 4.6, sustainable land use, which can be interpreted in different ways in different places. It'd be great to get some more information on how to start on those ones, knowing that you haven't got all the details worked out yet.
Thank you for the question, or rather comments maybe. So we try to progress also with these impact indicators, and like you correctly said, it is a bit region and country specific what data is available there. But at least we try to provide the methodology and give some examples that can be then followed and maybe adjusted to different places where these metrics is maybe not available at present.
Great. Is there any sort of go-to document that can at least explain these in just a little bit more detail, what you're envisaging?
Cecilia, what is the document that is now shared in public at this stage? You may answer to that.
Yeah. Thanks, Louise. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is at the moment what we would like how we would like to go about it is receive from all of you any activities that you're already measuring in terms of those of these impact indicators, because that would give us a sense of what is already being measured and how we can build on those types of indicators to make sure that we're not developing indicators that are not aligned with what is already happening. So it might be the case that in a number of projects there are already indicators aligned to this. The Sustainable Building and Construction Program has also volunteered already to take up 4.1 and 4.2, so energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emission reduction. So on those there is already more information. On the other ones, at the moment, there's the headline and there is not much else. Of course, this is something that we will be integrating in the second reporting phase throughout next year. So anything that you have in the meantime will be very useful. And once we have them more developed, of course, there will be further information and training.
And there was also a chat box that I saw. Maybe Cecilia, you can share the information how this recording can be shared afterwards, because it's a national holiday in Argentina.
Yes, that's a very good concluding question. So we will share the PDF of this presentation through email. The recording of this webinar will be on the Global STP Clearinghouse, and we will share the link for that too as soon as it's up on the Clearinghouse. Okay, I think that was the last question, at least the ones that I can see from my side. So
I haven't received any more. I'm really happy also to try to answer and continue the discussion after this webinar. But from my side, I'm just thanking everyone for attending this webinar, and hope we can together establish a solid structure for reporting these SCP impact measurement activities within the YFP.
I just wanted to say to everybody, really, this was excellent, so detailed, a lot of information to digest, and I look forward to receive the PDF and to get the recording as well for the link, because I definitely want to go over it again and again and get the areas that are focus for us to be involved.
Thank you.
So thank you then for all of you for your participation. We've already taken 10 extra minutes from your time and won't keep you longer, but you will receive from us some further information on where the recording is and the PDF of this presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.